Imagine a tiny village tucked away so deep in the wilderness, it feels almost forgotten by the rest of the world. That's Oakhaven. Surrounded by ancient, whispering trees and nestled by a winding river, life there was simple, predictable, and mostly peaceful. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and the biggest drama was usually a stray goat or a late harvest. It was a haven, truly, from the noisy chaos of modern life, a quiet corner of the world where time seemed to slow down. But then, something started to go terribly wrong. It began with the children. First, young Finn, who loved to chase butterflies in the meadow. One afternoon, he was just gone. No footprints, no struggle, just an empty space where a joyful boy had been. Then little Maya, a mischievous girl known for her bright red ribbons. She vanished from her own backyard while playing. With each disappearance, a cold dread seeped into the heart of Oakhaven. And worse, a new, unsettling sound accompanied these losses, a whisper. Not a whisper carried on a breeze, because often there was no breeze at all, but a sound that seemed to just appear, floating in the air. It was disembodied, chilling, like a phantom voice calling a name that wasn't there, a trick of the mind that sent shivers down your spine. Think of it like a radio signal cutting in, just for a second, with a ghostly message, then fading before you can quite grasp it. It was a sound that seemed to defy explanation, leaving villagers with goosebumps and a growing sense of unreality. While most villagers were reeling, paralyzed by grief and confusion, one person started to connect the dots. Her name was Alara. She wasn't loud or commanding, but she had this incredible way of seeing things others missed. You know how some people are just naturally observant? Like a quiet gardener who notices every subtle change in a plant, or a musician who hears the slightest off-key note in a symphony. That was Alara. Her quiet sensitivity made her attuned to the shifts in the village. The way shadows seemed a little deeper, the silence a little heavier, the fear in people's eyes a little more profound. She noticed the pattern, the children, the whisper, the inexplicable emptiness left behind. While others spoke of accidents or wild animals, Alara felt a deeper, more insidious truth stirring. She sensed the village wasn't just grieving, it was being hunted. And then there were the elders. Oh, the elders. Their faces, usually warm and wise, became canvases of an ancient, terrible fear. It was particularly evident in Mama Aziza, the oldest and most respected woman in Oakhaven. Her eyes, usually sparkling with stories, now held a deep, unreadable sorrow, like ancient wells reflecting a forgotten darkness. It was clear they weren't just sad, they knew something. Something heavy, buried deep in the village's past, perhaps. Their fear wasn't the sudden panic of a new threat, but the weary, resigned terror of facing an enemy they recognized, a burden they had hoped would never resurface. It was like watching someone prepare for a storm they knew was coming, even when the sky was clear to everyone else. They carried a secret, a heavy, unspoken knowledge that now, with each vanished child, threatened to break them. The peaceful rhythm of Oakhaven, once a gentle hum of daily life, was slowly, agonizingly, breaking. Each vanishing child was like a stone dropped into calm water, sending out ever-widening ripples of unease. First, it was just one, then two, then a terrifying pattern began to emerge. With each empty bed and each desperate, unanswered call, a new sound began to creep into the village, the whispers. These weren't the ordinary, hushed conversations of worried parents. No, this was something far more insidious. It was a constant, low thrum, like the faint buzz of an old radio tuned just between stations, always present but never quite forming intelligible words. It felt less like a sound and more like a vibration in the air, a persistent static charge that prickled the skin and crept into dreams. It felt like a secret conversation happening just out of earshot, a background hum the village simply couldn't shake. And always, it seemed to drift from the dense, ancient jungle that bordered Oakhaven like a wall of emerald green. Most villagers recoiled, pulling their children closer and locking their doors, afraid to even glance at the towering trees whose crowns kissed the clouds. But Alara, a young woman with a quiet courage, felt something different. Not just fear, but a strange, insistent pull, like a compass needle tugging her north. It was an inexplicable curiosity mixed with a fierce determination that compelled her to seek answers where others saw only menace. Under the cloak of dusk, or when dawn was still a hush of grey light, Alara would slip away. She ventured to the jungle's edge, where the shadows clung deepest and the whispers felt strongest. There, her breath hitched. Carved into the rough bark of ancient oaks and twisting vines were peculiar symbols. These weren't random scratches, they were deliberate, intricate designs that looked primal, like secret messages left by a time long past, or perhaps, a warning. Even more unsettling was the cold. It wasn't the natural chill of a forest at night. This was a deep, unnatural bite, like stepping into a freezer on a summer day. It lingered exactly where the whispers were most potent, making her skin prickle with goosebumps and sending shivers down her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. It felt heavy, expectant, as if something unseen was waiting, watching. Back in Oakhaven, the fear was curdling into something far uglier: suspicion. With no answers and no visible enemy, the villagers began to turn on each other. Whispers within the community grew sharp and venomous. Old grudges resurfaced. Fingers pointed at outsiders, at the reclusive elder, at anyone who seemed just a little bit different. Neighbors who had once shared meals and laughter now eyed each other warily across the village square. The fabric of Oakhaven, once so tightly woven, began to fray, threatening to tear the community apart from the inside, just as unseen forces seemed to be snatching their children from the edge of the wild. Alara's quest for answers had hit a brick wall. The strange occurrences, the unsettling sense of being watched, the growing power flickering within her, it was all too much to bear in silence. So, with a heart thumping like a trapped bird, she confronted Mama Aziza. The old woman, usually a vibrant tapestry of stories and laughter, seemed to deflate, her shoulders slumping. Getting the truth out of her was like pulling teeth from a stubborn old root. Mama Aziza's words were laced with a deep, ancient fear. But Alara wouldn't back down, and eventually, the dam broke. Mama Aziza reluctantly began to share fragmented, almost mythical tales of a place called Kawa Kawa. Imagine a legend whispered in hushed tones around campfires for centuries, a story so old it felt less like history and more like a dream. Kawa Kawa, she explained, was not just a city, but once a beating heart of immense power and forgotten magic. Think of it like a super-advanced civilization from ancient times, where knowledge and mystical arts flourished like nowhere else. Its inhabitants understood secrets of the world that modern people couldn't even dream of. However, that immense power came with a steep price. Now, Kawa Kawa lies in silent, crumbling ruins, swallowed whole by the relentless embrace of the deep, untamed jungle. It's like a grand, intricate palace that has been left to rot, with vines and roots reclaiming every stone, erasing its past glory. Mama Aziza's voice dropped to a near whisper as she spoke of the city's true terror. Kawa Kawa is rumored to be deeply cursed. This isn't just bad luck, it's a malevolent energy woven into the very fabric of the place. More chilling still, it's where the veil between worlds is thin. Picture this. Most of the time, our world and the spirit world are separated by a thick, invisible curtain. But in Kawa Kawa, that curtain is gossamer thin, almost transparent. It's like a radio tuning into a station from another dimension, allowing whispers, shadows, and sometimes even beings from beyond to leak through. Mama Aziza's eyes, usually twinkling with mischief, were now grave as she issued a dire warning, practically begging Alara to stay away. Approaching Kawa Kawa, she insisted, would invite only ruin and madness. Yet, despite the chilling stories and stern warnings, Alara felt an irresistible, almost spiritual, pull towards the ruins. It was more than curiosity, it was like an invisible tether tugging at her soul, an inner compass pointing directly to the forbidden city. Her vivid dreams, once just confusing night terrors, now felt like a cryptic map unfolding, filled with symbols and landscapes that mirrored Mama Aziza's descriptions. The unsettling visions that flickered behind her eyes during the day, once dismissed as fleeting fancy, now resonated with the ancient tales. Even those strange whispers, once dismissed as tricks of the wind, now seemed to coalesce into a faint, distant call. Alara wasn't just hearing about Kawa Kawa, she was beginning to believe she was being guided there, convinced that these ethereal nudges were deeply connected to the lost magic and dark secrets of the forgotten city. Imagine standing on the edge of a vast, emerald sea. That's what the jungle looked like to Alara. But this wasn't a relaxing beach vacation, it was the gateway to a mission born from a deep, aching sense of duty. Alara wasn't just walking into a forest, she was stepping into a challenge for her very soul. She carried the weight of her people's future on her shoulders, guided by a peculiar, burgeoning connection to the spiritual realm. A sort of internal compass that hummed with quiet urgency, pointing her towards the unknown. As she ventured deeper, the jungle quickly shed its initial beauty, revealing its true, treacherous nature. It wasn't just a collection of trees and vines, it was an active participant in her journey, almost like a living, breathing opponent. The air grew heavy, thick with unseen energies. What she thought was a sturdy ancient tree would subtly shift its form when she looked away, its branches seeming to rearrange themselves, closing off paths that had just been there. Familiar landmarks, a unique cluster of vibrant flowers, a strangely shaped rock, would simply vanish upon her return, leaving her utterly disoriented. Think of it like trying to walk through a house where the walls keep moving, or navigating a funhouse mirror maze where your own reflection seems to mock your direction. The jungle wove illusions so potent they didn't just trick her eyes, they toyed with her mind, challenging her very grip on reality. It wanted her to get lost, to give up, to become just another forgotten echo in its vast, green memory. Her only guide through this shifting labyrinth were faint, chilling whispers. They weren't loud or clear, but subtle, like a spectral breadcrumb trail, always just at the edge of hearing, pulling her deeper. Sometimes they felt like a warning, other times an enticing lure. Following their ghostly call, Alara started to notice things, not obvious trails, but ancient, almost forgotten pathways, barely discernible beneath layers of centuries-old growth. These weren't just worn tracks, they were like wrinkles on an ancient map, leading her to hidden clearings where gnarled trees bore strange, intricate carvings. These carvings weren't just pretty pictures. They were like finding a forgotten diary in an old, dusty attic, telling a story etched in stone. They spoke of an ancient, insidious entity known as the Shadow Weaver. This wasn't just a spooky name, it described a being whose power was terrifyingly unique. Its strength, the carvings revealed, wasn't tied to magic spells or brute force, but to something far more intimate, stolen memories and forgotten sorrows. Imagine someone who thrives not on gold or power, but on the blank spaces in people's minds, the childhood moments you can't quite recall, the names of loved ones whispered by time, the quiet griefs that were never fully mourned and simply faded away. Every forgotten face, every unremembered joy, every lingering, unaddressed sadness, that's its fuel. The Shadow Weaver grew stronger by making people forget, by siphoning off the very essence of what makes them who they are, leaving behind only shadows and empty spaces. This chilling discovery solidified Alara's resolve. Her path wasn't just about surviving the jungle's tricks, it was about confronting something that fed on the fundamental fabric of memory and emotion, threatening to erase not just individuals, but entire histories. The whispers had led her to a truth far darker and more profound than she could have imagined. Days blurred into a green, humid haze for Alara. Every step was a battle against the jungle's relentless embrace, tangled roots, buzzing insects, and the heavy, damp air that clung to her like a second skin. But the thought of the lost children, and the chilling whispers that had guided her through the wilderness, fueled her weary legs. She knew, deep in her bones, that the answers lay ahead, in the place the whispers had always pointed, Kawa Kawa. Then, as if the jungle itself held its breath, the dense canopy finally gave way. Before her, stretching further than the eye could see, lay Kawa Kawa. It wasn't just ancient, it felt ancient in a way that spoke of deep, forgotten time. It was magnificent, yes, with towering structures that scraped the sky, but also profoundly haunting, like a grand symphony hall suddenly emptied of all its music. Gigantic stone temples, once polished and proud, now wore thick cloaks of emerald moss and sprawling vines. Trees, ancient and gnarled, burst through crumbling walls, their roots like grasping fingers, slowly dismantling what time had left. It was a city caught between two worlds, the silent, stoic strength of its builders, and the relentless, green embrace of the jungle trying to reclaim it all. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every fallen stone a forgotten story. Driven by an unseen force, or perhaps by the whispers themselves growing stronger, Alara pushed deeper into the heart of the ruins. Finally, in a clearing where the jungle had momentarily retreated, she found it, a massive, obsidian altar. It wasn't just old stone, it felt alive. A faint, almost visible shimmer pulsed around it, like heat rising from a desert road, hinting at a powerful energy that still lingered. Here, the soft, swirling echoes that had followed her for days intensified, weaving themselves together, becoming clearer, sharper. Alara closed her eyes, letting the whispers wash over her. They weren't just random sounds anymore, they were like faint, broken echoes of laughter, snatches of half-remembered lullabies, the quick intake of a child's breath before a giggle. It hit her then, with a sickening lurch that stole her own breath away. This wasn't just residual energy or ancient spirits mumbling. This was far, far worse. It was like listening to a grand old record player, but instead of a full song, all you got were tiny, scratched-up snippets, a single note here, a half-syllable there. Each whisper, she understood with chilling clarity, wasn't just a sound, it was a fragment of a stolen moment, a tiny piece of a child's memory. Imagine someone taking your favorite memories, chopping them into 1,000 tiny pieces, and then scattering them on the wind. That's what the Shadow Weaver had done. These faint, heartbreaking sounds were the very essence of the vanished children. Their joy, their wonder, their fears, trapped here, by a dark magic, like butterflies pinned in an invisible jar. The horrifying truth settled in her bones. Kawa Kawa wasn't just an ancient ruin, it was a prison, and the altar was its beating, corrupted heart, holding the last, fading echoes of innocent lives. The horrifying truth hit Alara like a physical blow. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she sprinted through the moonlit forest, the chilling revelation burning in her mind. Every snapping twig underfoot, every rustle of leaves, sounded like a whisper of the impending doom. She had to get back to Oakhaven, had to confront Mama Aziza one last time. She burst into Mama Aziza's small, herb-scented hut, panting, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and fierce determination. Mama Aziza, hunched over a simmering pot, looked up, her ancient eyes initially filled with weariness, perhaps even a hint of dismissal. But this time, Alara wasn't asking, she was demanding answers. "It's the spirit of Kawa Kawa, isn't it?" Alara's voice was hoarse, but steady. "Something happened with our ancestors. Something bad." Mama Aziza flinched, her hands trembling slightly. She saw it then, not just fear, but a burning, undeniable conviction in Alara's eyes. It was the same unwavering light that had driven Oakhaven's true protectors for generations. The elder's shoulders slumped, as if a great, invisible weight had finally become too heavy to bear alone. A deep, sorrowful sigh escaped her lips, carrying with it centuries of unspoken grief. "Sit, child," Mama Aziza rasped, gesturing to a low stool. "It is time you knew the full, painful truth. A truth our ancestors buried, hoping the earth would forget." And then, the story unfolded, a tapestry woven from forgotten promises and ancient betrayals. Centuries ago, she explained, Oakhaven's ancestors had made a sacred pact with a powerful guardian spirit of Kawa Kawa. Think of it like a solemn, unbreakable handshake agreement. The spirit would protect their lands, ensure bountiful harvests, and keep the villagers safe from harm. In return, the people of Oakhaven pledged reverence, respect, and to live in harmony with the land, never taking more than they needed. But human greed, as it often does, eventually corrupted that promise. Over generations, the pact was forgotten, then intentionally ignored. Our ancestors, Mama Aziza confessed with a wince, grew complacent, taking the spirit's blessings for granted. They cleared forests where they shouldn't, mined sacred grounds, and simply stopped honoring their end of the bargain. It was a betrayal so profound it broke the spirit's essence, like shattering a precious vase. This ultimate breach didn't kill the spirit, but it plunged it into a deep, tormented slumber. It lay dormant, festering, for hundreds of years. Until recently. Until now. The betrayal awoke it, Mama Aziza whispered, her voice barely audible. But it didn't awaken as our benevolent protector. It arose as something twisted, something vengeful. She called it the Shadow Weaver. Imagine a once loyal dog, gentle and kind, driven mad by neglect and abuse, turning its rage on the very family it once loved. That's what the guardian spirit had become. The Shadow Weaver now sought not harmony, but retribution. And its sustenance? The youth of Oakhaven, their very life force, their innocence. The whispers Alara had heard in the forest? They weren't just in her mind anymore. They were seeping into the very fabric of Oakhaven itself, like a silent, invisible poison spreading through the village. These whispers manifested as the strange illnesses plaguing the children, the sudden, inexplicable bouts of madness gripping adults, turning friends into strangers and peace into paranoia. The silence, once a comfort, was now broken, revealing a sinister, ancient wound that threatened to consume them all. Mama Aziza, with lines etched deep into her face from years of wisdom and sorrow, carries a heavy burden. It's a shame that isn't her own, but a painful legacy inherited from her ancestors, a deep-seated regret over past failures that allowed the terrifying Shadow Weaver to gain its dreadful power. She sees Alara's arrival not just as a chance, but as a solemn duty. So, with a reluctant nod and a heart full of desperate hope, Mama Aziza agrees to guide Alara through something truly ancient and incredibly perilous. A ritual designed to face the Shadow Weaver head-on. Think of it like trying to deal with a force of nature, a raging storm, perhaps. This ritual aims to do one of two things. Either appease the Shadow Weaver, coaxing it into a state of calm like offering peace to a wild, unpredictable beast, or to bind it, effectively putting it in a magical cage like building a strong dam against a flood. Neither option is easy, and both are fraught with danger. What does this ritual demand? More than just courage, that's for sure. 1. Rare, jungle-specific ingredients. Imagine searching for a needle in a vast, overgrown haystack, but the haystack is a living, breathing jungle that actively tries to keep its secrets. Alara will need to venture deep into the heart of this ancient, untamed wilderness. We're talking about plants that bloom only once a decade under a specific moon, or a particular type of crystal found only in the deepest, most hidden caves. These aren't items you can just pick up at the local market. They demand respect, patience, and often, a brush with danger. 2. Deciphering ancient Kawa texts. The instructions for this ritual aren't written in a language Alara or even Mama Aziza readily understands. They're locked away in the Kawa texts, a collection of scrolls and carvings so old, their language is like a forgotten song. It's not just about translating words, it's about understanding the subtle nuances, the poetic metaphors, and the spiritual intent behind each symbol. Imagine trying to follow a recipe written in a forgotten language, where a single misunderstood word could turn a life-giving elixir into a deadly poison. Mama Aziza holds the key to some of these secrets, but Alara will need to learn to read between the lines herself. 3. A profound spiritual connection. This isn't just about mixing ingredients and chanting words. The ritual needs a direct line to the spiritual world, a connection so deep it hums with ancient power. And this is where Alara's journey truly begins. Alara's personal gauntlet, facing herself. To forge that spiritual connection, Alara won't just be battling the jungle's physical threats, the venomous creatures, the treacherous terrain, the ever-present feeling of being watched. She'll have to delve deep into her own ancestral heritage. Think of it like opening a forgotten family album, but instead of just pictures, it contains echoes of your ancestors' lives, their triumphs, and their mistakes. Alara will need to understand where she comes from, what strengths and weaknesses she's inherited, and how her own past connects to the larger story of her people and the Shadow Weaver itself. This will mean facing not only the jungle's external dangers but also her deepest fears, the doubts, the insecurities, the nagging voices that whisper she isn't good enough. And then, there's the ultimate demand. The ritual, if it's to succeed, may require a significant personal sacrifice. Mama Aziza speaks of it in hushed tones, her eyes filled with sorrow. It's not about giving up a material possession, it's something far more precious. Alara might have to offer a cherished memory, a moment that defines her, a piece of her very identity. Imagine having to choose one of your most precious childhood moments, a memory that brings you comfort or defines who you are, and willingly letting it go, forever. The thought alone is terrifying, a price that makes the deepest jungle seem tame in comparison. For this ritual of reclamation, the cost could be a piece of Alara's very soul. The air in Kawa felt different this time. It wasn't just the usual morning humidity, there was a heavy, almost electric tension humming beneath the surface, a mix of ancient dread and a fragile, burning hope. Alara, her gaze fixed and unwavering, led the small but determined procession back to the very heart of the village, the ancient, weathered altar where so much had been taken, and where, hopefully, so much could be reclaimed. Beside her, Mama Aziza walked with the steady, quiet strength of an old tree, her presence a grounding force against the palpable fear that clung to the edges of their brave villagers. This wasn't a charge into battle with swords and shields, it was a pilgrimage, a march of spiritual courage against an unseen enemy. As they reached the altar, the space around it began to distort. The light, already dim under the heavy canopy, seemed to be swallowed whole. The shadow weaver didn't appear as a hulking beast or a cloaked figure. Oh no, that would have been too simple. Instead, the air itself thickened, congealing into a swirling vortex of impenetrable shadows. Imagine pouring ink into clear water, but instead of dissipating, it just got darker and denser, coiling in on itself like a hungry, living storm. It was a black hole of pure malevolence, sucking in all light, all warmth, all peace. From within this inky abyss, a sound emerged, not a roar, but a symphony of torment, deafening whispers. These weren't just hushed words, they were a maelstrom of thoughts, fears, and heartaches. It was as if every stolen memory, every moment of raw terror, every secret doubt and regret from generations of Kawakawa's people had been scooped up and flung into a chaotic, screaming whirlwind. Think of it like being caught in a mental hurricane, where every voice is shouting your deepest fears, every sound is a reminder of loss. But Alara was ready. She took a deep breath, her eyes closing for a moment as she reached inward, tapping into something far older and more powerful than herself. This was her ancestral strength and courage a current of resilience passed down through her bloodline, waiting for this very moment. With a quiet resolve that belied the storm raging before her, she began the intricate ritual. It wasn't a simple chant or a quick prayer, it was a complex dance of movements, ancient words, and focused intention, a spiritual blueprint for mending what had been broken. This was no ordinary fight. There were no fists or blades, this was a battle not of strength, but of spiritual will. The Shadow Weaver wasn't trying to physically harm her, it was aiming for her very core. The whispers intensified, transforming from a chaotic jumble into something far more insidious. They became desperate pleas trying to tug at her empathy, to convince her to give up, to tell her she wasn't strong enough. Then, they twisted further, becoming agonizing screams echoes of pain and terror, designed to break her focus, to shatter her resolve, to make her doubt everything she believed in. It was a direct assault on her mind and spirit, a vicious tug of war for control of her very soul. Alara had to stand firm, like a lone lighthouse beam against a tempest of despair, every fiber of her being dedicated to holding her ground. Imagine you've been holding your breath for an impossibly long time, feeling the crushing weight of an invisible force pressing down on you. That's what it felt like for Alara during those final, agonizing moments of the ritual. Her body was screaming, her mind a dizzying swirl of ancient power and sheer, unyielding will. It wasn't just her in that moment, it was every ancestor who had ever stood on that land, their combined strength surging through her like a powerful river breaking through a dam. Then, with one final, desperate push, a silent roar of determination that echoed through generations, something shifted. Alara, drawing on that immense ancestral connection, didn't destroy the Shadow Weaver, but rather, she did something more profound. She pacified its vengeful spirit. Think of it like a wild, furious storm that has raged for centuries, suddenly finding a moment of absolute calm. The furious winds die down, the lightning ceases, and the dark clouds begin to part, revealing a sky that was always there, just hidden. And oh, how the world responded. The oppressive, suffocating shadows that had clung to the ruins like a heavy blanket didn't just fade, they dissipated, dissolving into the very air until the light, muted but real, could finally creep back in. The chilling whispers, those spectral taunts that had tormented Oakhaven for so long, didn't just stop, they softened, fading into a gentle, almost benevolent hum, like the distant memory of a lullaby. A wave of profound release washed over the ancient ruins, a palpable sigh of relief that seemed to emanate from the very stones themselves. And then, the true miracle, the vanished children. Or, more accurately, their reawakened essences. Imagine fragments of light, scattered like dust motes, slowly, beautifully, beginning to coalesce. Their individual memories, once shattered and lost to the shadowy prison, began to weave themselves back into the fabric of the land. It was like long-forgotten songs suddenly playing on the wind, or faint, beloved images appearing in a still pool of water. They weren't back in flesh and blood, but their spirits were free, their stories finally returned to the land that had grieved for them for so long. Back in Oakhaven, a collective breath, held tight for what felt like an eternity, was finally exhaled. A wave of profound relief, mixed with a lingering echo of sorrow, settled over the community. They were safe. Forever changed, yes. The scars of the Shadow Weaver would always be a part of their history, but undeniably, beautifully, wonderfully safe. The long night was over, and a new, clearer dawn had finally arrived. The terrifying shadows that once gripped Oakhaven have finally receded. In their place, a fragile but undeniable sense of peace began to bloom, much like the resilient jungle plants reclaiming a clearing after a storm. The chilling whispers, those insidious sounds that once seeped into every corner of the village, were gone. Instead, the air now hummed with the natural symphony of the rainforest, the chirping of unseen insects, the distant calls of exotic birds, and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. It was the jungle singing its own song again, a comforting melody that brought a sense of calm after the recent chaos. Oakhaven was healing, brick by brick and spirit by spirit. Laughter, once a rare and nervous sound, began to echo through the rebuilt homes. Yet, the experience had left an indelible mark, a deep imprint on the heart of the community. It was a scar, yes, but one that came with hard-won wisdom. They had faced something ancient and powerful, and they would never look at their world quite the same way again. At the heart of this transformation was Alara. Her quiet strength and unique connection to the spiritual world, once perhaps seen as unusual, were now recognized as a profound gift. She wasn't just a villager anymore, she had become a revered figure, a beacon of understanding. Think of her like a translator or a diplomat between two very different worlds, the everyday human realm of Oakhaven and the ancient, powerful, and often unseen forces of the land. She helped her people understand that the world was bigger and more mysterious than they had ever imagined, guiding them towards a new kind of respect and coexistence. And then there were the ruins of Kawa Kawa. Still partially shrouded by the ever-encroaching jungle, these ancient stones stood as a silent, powerful reminder. They weren't just old buildings, they were a library of forgotten histories, a cautionary tale whispered through time. They spoke of the profound importance of respecting the ancient pacts and spirits those unspoken agreements with the land and its unseen guardians. Imagine breaking a very old, very sacred promise. The ruins were a physical manifestation of what happens when that trust is broken, a stark lesson that some things are best left undisturbed, their ancient ways honored. Even as peace settled, a lingering sense of mystery remained, like the faint scent of rain after a storm. Not everything was fully explained, some aspects of the supernatural simply aren't meant for human comprehension. This enduring enigma was a testament to the fragile balance between humanity and the supernatural. It's like walking a tightrope, one wrong step, one act of disrespect or ignorance, and the delicate equilibrium can be shattered, with consequences far beyond what mere mortals can imagine. Oakhaven had learned its lesson, becoming a village forever bound to the echoes of a powerful past, and to the careful, respectful dance required to live in harmony with the ancient heart of the land.